I only borrowed Grandpa's old square ruler to straighten a steel bar. Yet my stepfather slammed me against the wall, screaming, "This workshop is mine." He thought he'd crushed my habit of fixing things. He didn't know that from that night. I began building something he couldn't destroy. A structure made of metal, wood, and truth. Something that would bring his entire empire of lies crashing down right in front of the city council. My name is Nora Whitfield. And at 34, I never imagined I'd be moving back into my childhood home in Westridge. The divorce papers were barely dry when I pulled into the gravel driveway. My engineering degree and years at Riverton Dynamics feeling worthless against the weight of starting over. Mom stood on the porch, wringing her hands in that familiar way. Lorraine Brooks had perfected the art of anxious hospitality over the years. "Your room's ready," she said softly. Not meeting my eyes, behind her, Carl Denton filled the doorframe like a territorial bear marking his domain. My stepfather. The local construction magnate, who'd somehow convinced my gentle mother that his presence improved our lives. "The engineer returns," Carl said, his voice dripping with mock reverence. "Hope you don't plan on cluttering up my space with your college books." His space. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. This had been Grandpa Walter's house long before Carl ever darkened our doorstep. Walter Brooks, master machinist, the man whose hands could coax precision from raw metal, like a symphony conductor drawing music from chaos. He'd been dead 2 years now, but his workshop still stood behind the house, a corrugated metal testament to real craftsmanship. I spent my first week back avoiding Carl, helping Mom with her garden, sending out resumes. But the workshop called to me. One evening, when Carl was at another business dinner with the Westridge Public Works Commissioners, I slipped out back with Grandpa's key. The door creaked open, releasing the scent of machine oil and metal shavings. "Oh, to Walter Brooks." My fingers found the light switch, and fluorescent tubes flickered to life, revealing Carl's contamination. He'd shoved Grandpa's carefully organized tool cabinets against the wall, locked them with cheap padlocks. His own equipment, inferior harbor freight garbage, sprawled across the workbenches. But the machines, the beautiful machines, remained. The Bridgeport Mill, the South Bend lathe, each one maintained to surgical standards by my grandfather's methodical hands. I approached the locked cabinets, running my fingers along the worn wood. Through a gap, I glimpsed Grandpa's notebook, the one where he'd recorded every job, every technique. My hand was reaching for a pry bar when footsteps crunched on gravel. "Admiring the collection?" Carl's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the evening sky. "Everything in here belongs to the family now. My family." "I am family," I said, hating how my voice shook. "You're a guest," he corrected, moving closer. "Your mother and I have plans for this space. Demolition, probably. Make room for my equipment storage." Demolition. The word hit like a physical blow. I watched him pat one of the locked cabinets possessively, and something in his gesture triggered a memory. Grandpa showing me his special dies and jigs, the ones with micro-markings he'd developed for tracking steel batches. "Every piece tells a story, Nora," he'd said. "You just need to know how to read it." "These tools are precision instruments," I said carefully. "Grandpa's dies alone are worth what I say they're worth." Carl interrupted. His hand tightened on the cabinet handle, knuckles white. "And I say they're scrap. Don't touch anything in here again." That night, I lay awake analyzing his reaction. Carl Denton, owner of Denton Buildworks, winner of multiple municipal contracts including the recent $12.8 million Maple Bridge reinforcement project. A man who shouldn't care about some old machinist's tools, yet guarded them like state secrets. The next morning, while Carl was at a site visit, I returned to the workshop with my phone camera. Through the cabinet gaps, I photographed pages of Grandpa's notebook. The micro-stamping codes jumped out at me, a system for marking steel with nearly invisible identifiers. Walter Brooks hadn't just been a craftsman, he'd been documenting something. But what? Mom found me there, her face pale. "Nora, Please, Carl's been good to us. The house was falling apart after Dad died. The roof, the foundation. Paid for with what money, Mom? I asked. But she was already walking away, shoulders bent under the weight of willful blindness. That afternoon, I drove past the Maple Bridge construction site. Denton Buildworks signs everywhere. Carl's name painted bold across the future of Westridge's infrastructure. I pulled over and zoomed in with my camera, capturing the steel beam markings. Grade A 572/50, high-strength structural steel, the kind that keeps bridges from collapsing, families from mourning. But something was off about the surface texture, the color. I'd spent enough time in Grandpa's workshop to recognize quality steel. And this wasn't it. This was theatrical steel. Costume jewelry pretending to be diamonds. The workspace Carl wanted to demolish held more than memories. It held evidence, and I was going to find it. The broken porch railing had been bothering Mom for weeks. Saturday evening, while Carl was at his poker game, I decided to fix it. I'd measured, cut the replacement pieces in the garage, and needed Grandpa's table saw for the final trim. The workshop key was still in my pocket. The fluorescent lights hummed to life as I fed the wood through the saw. Muscle memory from countless hours with Grandpa guiding my hands. The satisfying whine of the blade. The clean scent of fresh-cut pine. For a moment, I was 16 again, learning that precision wasn't just measurement but intention. I didn't hear Carl's truck pull up. The workshop door slammed open with such force it bounced off the wall. Carl stood there, face twisted with rage, poker game apparently forgotten. "What did I tell you?" His voice was low, dangerous. "The porch railing," I started, but he was already moving. His hands hit my shoulders hard, shoving me backward, my spine connected with the concrete wall, knocking the breath from my lungs. The table saw was still running, its blade spinning between us like a threat. Carl reached past it, snatching Grandpa's square ruler from the bench. "This is mine." He waved the ruler inches from my face. "Everything in here. Mine. You want to play carpenter? Do it somewhere else." I stayed pressed against the wall, fighting the urge to grab the ruler back. I was 34 years old, an engineer with safety certifications, and here I was, being cornered in my grandfather's workshop by a man who'd married into our family and claimed ownership of our heritage. "Carl," Mom's voice from the doorway, barely a whisper. She'd heard the commotion. "Please." He turned to her, still gripping the ruler. "Your daughter needs to learn respect. Lorraine, this is my property now." "It's Dad's workshop," I said, finding my voice. "You have no right." "I have every right." He spun back to me. "I pay the bills. I keep this place running. Your precious Grandpa left nothing but debt and old junk." That was a lie. I knew it. Mom knew it. And from the defensive set of Carl's jaw, he knew we knew it. But Mom just stood there, shrinking into herself, choosing peace over truth. Carl tossed the square ruler onto the floor. It clattered at my feet, the precision-ground edge chipping against the concrete. "Next time you're in here without permission, I call the cops for trespassing. We clear?" He stormed out, pulling Mom with him. I waited until I heard the house door slam before I moved, my hands shaking as I picked up Grandpa's ruler. The chip in the edge felt like a wound. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment. Carl's rage, his possessiveness over tools he'd never use, couldn't even use properly. At 3 a.m., I crept back to the workshop with my phone, a measuring tape, and a notebook. Working in darkness with only my phone's flashlight, I documented everything. The locked cabinets. I managed to photograph more notebook pages through the gaps, pages covered with steel-grade specifications, batch numbers, dates, the tools, serial numbers, makes, models, Carl's inferior equipment mixed with Grandpa's precision instruments like fast food wrappers in a Michelin restaurant. Then I found it, tucked behind the lathe, a small locked box I recognized. Grandpa's special project box. He'd shown it to me once, his dies for micro-stamping steel. "Every beam tells a story," he'd said. "Mark your work. Nora, always mark your work. I couldn't pick the lock, but I photographed it from every angle. Something Carl had said echoed in my mind. Your precious grandpa left nothing but debt. But Walter Brooks had been meticulous with money, saved every receipt, recorded every transaction. If there was debt, where did it come from? And why was Carl so desperate to control access to the workshop? Back in my room, I opened my laptop and started researching. Denton Buildworks, established 8 years ago, right after Carl married Mom. First contract small, residential repairs, renovations, then a sudden jump to municipal projects. The Maple Bridge wasn't his first. He'd done the 3rd Street overpass, the Riverside Elementary expansion, the water treatment plant upgrades, millions in contracts for a man who couldn't tell a precision square from a framing square. I created a new folder, the build. Not the physical structure I'd construct, that would come later, but the case, the evidence, the framework of truth that would support everything else. I uploaded the photos, started a timeline, noted every contract I could find in public records. Then I opened a new document and typed, Inventory of Walter Brooks' workshop, documentation of assets and anomalies. Below that, I wrote my promise. I will not let him erase you. Grandpa, I will not let him profit from your legacy while destroying your life's work. I will build something he can't tear down. Justice, carved from truth as precisely as you carved beauty from metal. The chip in the square ruler caught the lamplight on my desk. Battle scars. I thought, the first of many. The Maple Bridge reinforcement project consumed my thoughts for the next 2 weeks, every morning. I drove past the construction site on my way to job interviews, watching Denton Buildworks crews unload steel beams marked with Grade A 57250 specifications, high strength, low alloy structural steel, the gold standard for critical infrastructure. On paper, Carl was delivering exactly what the city paid for. But paper lies as easily as men do. My breakthrough came through LinkedIn, of all places. A former Riverton Dynamics colleague, Marcus, now worked quality control at Heartland Steel Suppliers, over coffee. I showed him my photos of the Maple Bridge beams. Something's off about the surface oxidation, I said, sliding my phone across the table. Marcus squinted at the images. That's not A57250. The grain structure's wrong. See that orange tint? That's mild steel. Probably A36, common as dirt and about half the yield strength. Would it pass a visual inspection? Visual? Sure, but any competent contractor would run mill test certificates, ultrasonic testing, maybe spectrographic analysis if they're serious about safety. I thought of Carl's poker buddies, the city inspectors who signed off on his projects. What if the inspector wasn't that serious? Marcus gave me a long look. Then you'd have a bridge that looks perfect until the day it doesn't. That afternoon, I parked beneath the Maple Bridge with my camera's zoom lens. The micro stamps Grandpa had taught me about weren't random. They were a quality control system, a way to track steel from mill to installation. Through my lens, I found them. Tiny indentations on the beam flanges, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Cross-referencing with Grandpa's notebook that evening, I found the pattern. His micro-stamping system used a series of dots and dashes, like Morse code for metal. The beams on the Maple Bridge carried a signature I recognized, batch hash 447B from Heartland Steel, but according to the shipping manifest I'd found in public records, batch hash 447B was supposed to be A57250 delivered to another Denton Buildworks project 6 months ago. The pieces clicked together like tumblers in a lock. Carl was playing a shell game with steel. Order high grade for Project A. Install low grade instead. Then use the high grade on private projects where he could charge premium prices. The city got compromised infrastructure while Carl pocketed the difference, probably $300,000 on the Maple Bridge alone. I needed more proof. The next morning, I filed a Freedom of Information request for all inspection reports on Denton Buildworks municipal projects. While waiting for the bureaucracy to grind forward, I did what engineers do. I researched. the 3rd Street overpass, completed 2 years ago. 3 complaints about unusual vibrations during heavy traffic. The Riverside Elementary expansion, mysterious settling cracks appearing after 6 months. The water treatment plant, pipes already showing stress fractures that nobody could have predicted. Each project inspected by rotating city officials, but one name appeared more than others: Dennis Hoyt, Senior Inspector for Westridge Public Works, the same Dennis Hoyt whose truck I'd seen at Carl's poker games. The FOIA results arrived as a USB drive 2 weeks later. I spent the entire night comparing inspection reports to material invoices, building a spreadsheet that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. The pattern was consistent: high-grade steel ordered, signed for, paid for. But the microstamps told different stories: batch numbers that appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, like steel with the gift of bilocation. The most damning evidence came from comparing Carl's private projects: luxury homes in Hawthorne Hills, the Westridge Country Club renovation, with the municipal timeline. Every time Carl shortchanged a public project, high-grade steel mysteriously appeared at his premium job sites within days. I photographed purchase orders showing A572.50 steel bought for the Maple Bridge. I documented the microstamps proving that steel never made it to the bridge. I tracked that same steel to a mansion foundation pour, billed at premium rates to a client who actually got what they paid for. Mom found me at 4 a.m., surrounded by papers, laptop screen full of spreadsheets. "Nora, what are you doing?" "Did you know Grandpa's microstamping was a quality control system?" I asked, not looking up. "He was tracking steel batches for years. He must have suspected something." She sank into the chair across from me. "Your grandfather, he asked questions near the end, about Carl's projects, about the steel. Carl said he was getting senile." "He wasn't senile, Mom. He was right." Her face crumpled. "What am I supposed to do? If Carl goes to prison—" "Then you'll be free," I finished, "and the city will be safer." She left without another word, but she didn't tell Carl about my research. That was all the support I could expect from her: silent complicity in the name of justice, or maybe just exhaustion. I backed up everything to 3 cloud services and a physical drive I hid in a safety deposit box. Then I opened a new document. Structural Integrity Concern. Confidential Report for Westridge Office of Public Works Integrity Division. The corruption ran deeper than just stolen steel. It was about trust. The trust that bridges won't collapse, that schools won't crumble, that water treatment plants won't fail. Carl had stolen more than money. He'd stolen the city's safety margin, trading lives for profit. But I had the receipts, I had the microstamps, I had Grandpa's meticulous records and my own engineering expertise. Now I just needed to build the trap. Working in darkness became my routine. After Carl's threats, I couldn't risk the workshop during normal hours, so I became nocturnal, sleeping until noon, helping Mom with errands in the afternoon, then slipping into the garage after midnight when Carl's snoring shook the walls. The garage wasn't the workshop, but it would do. I'd salvaged what I could: Grandpa's microstamping dies hidden in a toolbox, a portable hydraulic press I bought from a pawn shop, scraps of steel from construction dumpsters around town. Piece by piece, I was building something that would destroy Carl more thoroughly than any physical blow. The physical structure came first: a scale model of a bridge truss, about 6 feet long and 3 feet high. Not just any bridge, but a perfect 120 replica of the Maple Bridge's critical load-bearing section. Every joint, every beam, every bolt hole precisely positioned. I used 2 types of steel: a 572.50 for one half, a 36 mild steel for the other, both marked with Grandpa's microstamping system. But the real construction was happening in the legal realm. I registered as a whistleblower with the Westridge Office of Public Works Integrity Division under file hash 2024-0847. The anonymous filing system meant Carl couldn't trace it back to me. Yet, I fed them information in careful doses: suspicious invoices, steel batch discrepancies, inspection irregularities, Enough to open an investigation, not enough to trigger Carl's warning network among his City Hall drinking buddies. The beauty of engineering is that physics doesn't lie. Load ratings, stress tests, failure points, these are mathematical certainties, not opinions. I set up a testing rig in the garage using digital load cells I'd ordered online, strain gauges from my old university contacts, and a high-speed camera borrowed from Marcus. Every test was documented, recorded, uploaded to multiple secure servers. The A57250 section of my model could handle 340 pounds of distributed load before showing stress. The A36 section bent at 170 pounds, failed catastrophically at 195. Just like the real Maple Bridge would fail if a fully loaded truck convoy crossed during rush hour, or a school bus full of children during a field trip. I created visualizations, stress analysis models, failure cascades, built a website on the dark web. Paranoid, maybe. But Carl had connections, where I uploaded everything. Then I sent anonymous tips to journalists at the Westridge Ledger, complete with links and verification codes. The response was silence. 2 weeks of nothing. Then I got smart about the bait. I created a fictitious community organization, Westridge Youth Engineering Initiative, built a legitimate-looking website, filed the nonprofit paperwork, even opened a bank account with $500 of my savings. Then I sent Denton Buildworks a request for proposal. Would they donate materials and expertise for a community bridge building demonstration to inspire young engineers? Carl bit hard. The PR opportunity was too good. Local contractor gives back, supports STEM education, bridges to the future. He personally called the number I'd set up, his voice oozing false generosity. We'd be honored to support the youth of Westridge, he said. In fact, we have some surplus steel from the Maple Bridge project that would be perfect. Surplus steel. I documented every word. The demonstration was scheduled for 3 weeks out at the Westridge Community Center. I sent invitations to the City Council, the engineering department at State University, the local news stations. See the same techniques used in the Maple Bridge reconstruction, transparency and infrastructure. Meanwhile, my garage laboratory grew. I'd managed to extract one of Grandpa's locked cabinets through the workshop window while Carl was at a convention. Inside, along with precision tools, I found his final notebook. The entry stopped 2 weeks before his death, but the last pages were damning. C.D. Substituting materials again, marked samples from 3rd Street site. Definite mismatch. Tried to tell Lorraine, but she won't hear it. If something happens to me, check the steel. Always check the steel. The stamps don't lie. Grandpa had known. He'd been building this same case when his heart failed, or was made to fail, but that was a darkness I couldn't prove and tried not to contemplate. I built a second model, smaller, designed for destructive testing, set up a live stream channel, anonymous but verified, scheduled to go live during the community demonstration. The trap was intricate. Carl would display his surplus steel. I'd test it publicly, and the microstamps would prove it was the same substandard material installed in the Maple Bridge. 3 days before the demonstration, I filed my complete report with the State Engineering Board, the Federal Highway Administration, and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. 90 pages of documentation, test results, financial analysis, and safety projections. The cover letter was simple. The attached evidence demonstrates systematic infrastructure fraud endangering public safety. Immediate intervention requested before the scheduled public demonstration reveals the extent of criminal negligence. Then I went to the workshop one last time, in broad daylight. Carl was inspecting the Maple Bridge site. I used Grandpa's key, walked to his workbench, and retrieved his engineering stamp, the official seal he'd used for 40 years of honest work. That night, I stamped my report. Verified by Walter Brooks, master machinist, posthumous, and Nora Whitfield, professional engineer. The building was complete. The structure, physical, legal, digital, stood ready. All that remained was the demonstration, the revelation, the collapse of Carl's empire of lies. I spent that evening cleaning Grandpa's square ruler, buffing out the chip Carl had caused, preparing it for its moment of truth. The Westridge Community Center's main hall could hold 300 people. By 2 p.m. on demonstration day, we had almost 400 crammed in, with more watching through the windows. City council members sat in the front row, their faces ranging from curious to concerned. My anonymous tips to their offices had clearly made an impact. I stood beside my covered bridge model, wearing Grandpa's old shop apron over my best engineering conference blazer, professional but practical. The loading rig towered beside me, hydraulic ram, digital displays, cameras ready to capture every newton of force, every millimeter of deflection. Carl arrived 15 minutes late, making an entrance with his crew. He'd dressed for success, tailored suit, company polo underneath, hard hat tucked under his arm like a prop. His eyes found me immediately, narrowing at my presence. "Miss Whitfield," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't know you were involved with the Youth Engineering Initiative." "Community service runs in the family," I replied, matching his volume. "Grandpa Walter would have loved this." His jaw tightened at Grandpa's name, but he recovered quickly. Turning to glad hand the council members, Dennis Hoyt was there too, the inspector who'd signed off on all Carl's projects, sweating despite the air conditioning. At 2:30, I took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to witness the importance of structural integrity in our daily lives. Today, we'll demonstrate exactly how the steel in our bridges, specifically the Maple Bridge, keeps us safe." Carl shifted in his seat. "Mr. Denton of Denton Buildworks has generously provided steel samples from the Maple Bridge project." I continued. "We'll test these alongside my scale model to show the remarkable engineering protecting our community." I pulled the cover off my bridge model. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was beautiful. Even I could admit that. Every rivet visible, every beam labeled, one half gleaming with quality steel, the other identical except for the microstamps I knew were there. "First," I announced, "let's examine Mr. Denton's samples." Carl's crew wheeled in a cart with foot-long beam sections. He stood, buttoning his jacket. "These are certified A500 7250 high-strength steel. Exactly what we installed in the Maple Bridge. Same batch, same quality Westridge taxpayers paid for." I picked up one of his samples, running my fingers along the edge. "May I?" I asked, holding up a magnifying camera connected to the projection screen. Carl nodded, confident. The camera zoomed in on the steel's surface. There they were. Microstamps. Barely visible but undeniable. I'd memorized this pattern. Batch hash 447B. The steel that was supposed to be high grade but wasn't. "Interesting markings," I said casually. "Now, let's test the load capacity." I placed Carl's sample in the testing rig. The hydraulic ram descended slowly. Pressure building. The digital display showed the numbers climbing. 1,000 psi, 2,000, 3,000. At 3,850 psi, the steel bent. At 4,200 psi, it failed completely. The room was silent. I pulled up a prepared slide showing the specifications for a 57250 steel. According to ASTM standards, Grade A 57250 steel should withstand minimum yield strength of 50,000 psi. This sample failed at less than a tenth of that. Carl stood up. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I interrupted, switching slides to show the Maple Bridge construction photos. "These microstamps match exactly. Would you like to explain why the steel you're calling A500 7250 performs like a 36 mild steel?" His face went from red to white. "This is a setup." "Let's test my model then." I moved to the bridge replica. "This half is built with verified A500 7250. This half with A36. Watch what happens under load." I activated the loading system. Sandbags descended onto the bridge model, each one labeled with its weight. The display showed the total load, the stress distribution, the strain on each section. At 170 pounds, the A36 side began to bow visibly. This is equivalent to normal traffic load on the actual bridge. I explained. Now let's add the weight of a single fully loaded truck. At 195 pounds, the A36 side crumpled. The failure was catastrophic. The entire half of the model collapsed while the A57250 side remained perfectly straight. Phones came out everywhere, recording, streaming. The Westridge Ledger reporter was typing furiously. Council members were on their feet. "Mr. Denton," the council president said slowly, "are you telling us the Maple Bridge has this substandard steel?" Carl's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Dennis Hoyt was already backing toward the door. I clicked to my final slide, a live feed from cameras I'd placed under the actual Maple Bridge that morning. Zoomed in on the microstamps on the reel beams. The pattern was identical to Carl's failed sample. "The evidence has been submitted to relevant authorities," I announced. The full report, including financial records showing Mr. Denton billing for Grade A, $572.50 while installing A36, is available online. The difference in cost, approximately $300,000, appears to have been diverted to private projects in Hawthorne Hills. Carl lunged toward me, but two off-duty cops in the audience stepped forward. "You destroyed my reputation," he snarled. "No," I said calmly, holding up Grandpa's square ruler. "You destroyed it yourself the moment you chose profit over people's lives. This ruler builds straight and true. You built crooked and called it square." The state police arrived 20 minutes later, just as Carl was trying to leave. They had warrants. My filed reports had triggered an immediate response once verified. Dennis Hoyt was arrested in the parking lot. The Maple Bridge was closed within the hour for emergency inspection. But the demonstration wasn't over. I had one more test to run, one more truth to reveal. The crowd hadn't dispersed. If anything, it had grown, with people streaming in from the parking lot where Carl was being read his rights. The council president had called an emergency session right there in the community center. Local news vans were setting up outside, their reporters doing live broadcasts with my demonstration still visible in the background. I wasn't done. "If I may have your attention," I called out, pulling the tarp off a second display I'd prepared. "The Maple Bridge isn't an isolated incident." The projection screen lit up with a map of Westridge, red dots marking every Denton Build Works public project. Each dot was clickable, linked to inspection reports, invoices, and most damningly, photographs of microstamps. "The 3rd Street overpass," I began, clicking the first dot. "Completed in 2022. Billed for a $572.50 steel at $2.3 million. Actually installed A36, saving Mr. Denton approximately $180,000. The screen showed side-by-side comparisons. Purchase orders, bank records I'd obtained through the whistleblower investigation, and photos of the substandard steel's microstamps. Click, Riverside Elementary Expansion, your children's school. Load-bearing beams in the gymnasium where kids play every day. A 36 steel where A992 structural steel was specified and paid for. Gasps from the audience. Parents with kids at Riverside were pulling out phones, making calls. Click, the water treatment plant. Pipes already showing stress fractures because the steel can't handle the specified pressure ratings. Each revelation built on the last, a cascade of fraud that touched every corner of Westridge, but I'd saved the most damaging for last. "Mr. Denton claimed my grandfather left nothing but debt," I said, my voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "I found this in Grandpa Walter's final notebook." The screen displayed a photographed page, Grandpa's meticulous handwriting clear. October 2nd, C.D. offered to help with supposed tax debt. No such debt exists, verified with county. He wants the workshop, specifically the stamping equipment. Why? Following steel shipments. Pattern suspicious. October 9th, confronted C.D. about 3rd Street steel. He threatened Lorraine's house if I didn't stop making trouble. Have hidden documentation in workshop walls. If something happens, check behind panel hash 4. I'd found panel hash 4 3 nights ago. Behind it, wrapped in oilcloth, was everything. Photos, steel samples, even a recorded conversation between Carl and Dennis Hoyt discussing how to falsify inspection reports. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, connecting my laptop to the speakers, "Walter Brooks' final recording, made 2 days before his death." Grandpa's voice filled the room, strong despite his age. "Carl, that steel won't hold. You're going to kill someone." Carl's response, clear and contemptuous. "Old man, nobody's asking your opinion. Sign over the workshop, or I make sure Lorraine loses everything. Your choice." "I'll go to the authorities." "With what proof? Your word against mine? Against Dennis? Against the entire inspection department? You're 78 years old. People will think dementia finally got you." A pause, then Grandpa again. "Those microstamps tell the truth. Those stamps are mine once you're gone, and trust me, Walter, you're already gone." The recording ended. The silence was deafening. "My grandfather died of a heart attack 48 hours later," I said quietly. "He was in perfect health according to his last physical. The workshop locks were changed the day after his funeral." Someone in the crowd shouted, "That's murder!" The council president was on his phone with the district attorney. The state police officers who'd arrested Carl were already on their radios, requesting homicide detectives. But I still wasn't finished. I walked to my bridge model, picked up a strain gauge, and held it high. "This gauge measures truth," I said. "It doesn't care about connections, poker games, or payoffs. It shows what is, not what someone claims." I connected it to one of Carl's steel samples still in the testing rig. Every piece of substandard steel has a digital fingerprint, its failure pattern under stress. The screen showed a graph, peaks and valleys of stress response. This pattern matches exactly with steel from Carl's personal stockyard, which I documented last night. I'd broken into his yard, technically trespassing, but the FBI agent I'd been working with had suggested that evidence in plain view was admissible. "But here's what really matters," I continued, pulling up a structural analysis of the Maple Bridge. "With the correct steel, this bridge has a safety factor of 4.5. It can handle 4.5 times its maximum rated load. With Carl's steel?" The numbers appeared in red. 1.2. 20% safety margin, 1 overloaded truck convoy, 1 ice storm adding weight, 1 structural shift from settling, and we have a catastrophe. The Westridge Ledger reporter stood up. "Miss Whitfield, are you saying the bridge could collapse?" "I'm saying it will collapse unless immediately reinforced. The physics doesn't lie. The microstamps don't lie. The strain gauges don't lie." I looked directly at the camera broadcasting live. Only Carl Denton lied. The room erupted. Council members demanding immediate action. Parents calling for school closures until inspections were complete. The state transportation secretary, who'd been watching the live stream, announced emergency inspections of every Denton BuildWorks project in the state. Through the chaos, I saw Mom standing by the door. She'd been there the whole time, watching her father's vindication, her daughter's triumph, her husband's destruction. Our eyes met across the room. She nodded once, then walked out. I picked up Grandpa's square ruler, running my finger along the repaired edge where Carl had chipped it. "This demonstration is over," I announced. "The building is complete." But we all knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Every structure Carl had touched would need inspection. Every beam would need testing. Every lie would need correcting with truth as straight and strong as properly rated steel. The workshop would be mine again soon, and Grandpa's tools would build again, not just objects, but justice. The collapse happened faster than an improperly reinforced bridge. Within an hour of my demonstration, Carl's empire crumbled on live television. The footage of him being questioned by reporters as state police held him became instant viral content. His face, contorted with rage, spitting denials that fooled no one. "You fabricated everything," he shouted at cameras, struggling against handcuffs. "That woman, she's bitter about her divorce, jealous of my success." A reporter shoved a microphone closer. Mr. Denton, how do you explain the microstamps matching your invoices? I don't know anything about stamps. You just heard your own voice on tape threatening Walter Brooks. That was taken out of context. What context justifies threatening an elderly man 2 days before his death? Carl's lawyer finally reached him, pushing through the crowd, hissing at him to stop talking, but Carl had lost all control. The careful businessman facade shattered completely. "Ask her about the break-in," Carl screamed, pointing at me through the community center windows. "She broke into my yard. She stole from my workshop. My workshop." The FBI agent who'd been coordinating with me stepped forward. "Mr. Denton, you just claimed ownership of the workshop that belonged to Walter Brooks. The same workshop you told Mrs. Lorraine Denton was worthless. Which is it?" Inside the community center, the emergency city council session was in full swing. I sat in the witness chair, my laptop connected to their projection system, walking them through 8 years of systematic fraud. The total was staggering: $3.2 million stolen through material substitution across 17 projects. Council President Rebecca Torres leaned forward. "Miss Whitfield, in your professional opinion, which structures pose immediate danger?" "The Maple Bridge is critical," I replied, pulling up my analysis. "But the Riverside Elementary Gymnasium is equally urgent. Children are in there daily, and the roof load in winter—" "Close them," Torres interrupted, turning to the city manager. "Close them all immediately." "That's 14 buildings, 3 bridges." "Then close 14 buildings and 3 bridges. I will not have blood on this city's hands." The Westridge School District Superintendent was already on his phone, initiating emergency protocols. The room buzzed with coordinated crisis management, but one voice cut through it all. $63 million. Everyone turned to the state auditor who'd arrived during my demonstration. "Preliminary estimate," she continued, reading from her tablet. $63 million to properly rebuild or reinforce all compromised structures. That doesn't include lawsuits, federal penalties, or investigation costs. The council members looked sick. Westridge's entire annual budget was only $40 million. "Denton Buildworks has assets," someone suggested. "Already frozen by federal order," the FBI agent announced, "but it won't be enough. Most of the stolen money is gone. Gambling debts, personal expenses, maintaining appearances." I stood up. "There's insurance and performance bonds. I have copies of everything." I'd spent 3 weeks tracking down every financial instrument, every guarantee Carl had signed. He defrauded the insurance companies too, but they'll still have to pay out for public safety. The room erupted in questions, but I was watching the small TV in the corner, tuned to local news. They were interviewing parents at Riverside Elementary, teachers describing suspicious cracks in gymnasium walls, maintenance workers who'd reported concerns that were dismissed by inspectors. Then the news switched to breaking coverage. Dennis Hoyt, the corrupt inspector, had flipped, on screen. He stood beside his lawyer outside the federal building. "I have documentation of every bribe, every falsified report, every communication with Carl Denton," Hoyt announced. "I'm cooperating fully with authorities to ensure public safety." Throwing Carl under the bus, or in this case, under the substandard bridge. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "At home, Carl's things on the lawn, locks changed. Thank you." The council meeting continued for 3 more hours. I presented everything: the whistleblower reports filed with my anonymous identity, the FBI coordination, the evidence secured in safety deposit boxes. By the end, they'd voted unanimously on several emergency measures. Immediate termination of all Denton Buildworks contracts, 5-year ban on Carl bidding for any public works, criminal referral to the district attorney, civil lawsuit to recover stolen funds, emergency infrastructure assessment funded by the state. As the vote concluded, Torres addressed me directly. "Miss Whitfield, the city owes you a debt we can't repay. You've potentially saved lives." "My grandfather saved lives," I corrected. "He documented everything. I just finished what he started." Outside, The parking lot was chaos. News vans from 3 states, protesters with signs reading, "Denton built death traps," and structural engineers arriving to begin emergency inspections. Through it all, I walked calmly to my car, carrying Grandpa's square ruler and his notebook. A reporter caught me at my car door. "Nora, how does it feel to be the woman who brought down Carl Denton?" I thought about the question, looking back at the community center where democracy and justice were actually working. "I didn't bring him down," I said finally. "Physics did. Engineering doesn't lie. Steel strength is mathematical fact. I just showed everyone the math." "But this was personal, wasn't it? Your grandfather believed in building things properly. Carl believed in building wealth through deception. One of those philosophies was always going to collapse." As I drove away, my phone lit up with notifications. Job offers from engineering firms, interview requests from national media, a message from the State Engineering Board about a commendation. But I only cared about one destination, the workshop. It was mine again, legally. The protection order had been approved that morning. Every tool, every machine, every micro-stamped die that Carl had tried to steal, returned to their rightful heir. The garage door opened to Grandpa's sanctuary. I set his ruler on the workbench, exactly where he'd always kept it. Then I pulled out my laptop and created a new file. Brooks and Whitfield Engineering Consultants, Structural Truth Through Precision. It was time to build something new, something true, something that would stand. The workshop lights flickered on for the first time in months without fear. 6 weeks had passed since the demonstration. Carl's trial was set for spring. Multiple charges including fraud, racketeering, and now potential manslaughter after investigators found evidence about Grandpa's death. He'd been denied bail, deemed a flight risk after authorities discovered offshore accounts. I stood in the center of Grandpa's domain, now legally mine through a court order that had stripped Carl of any claim to the Brooks family property. The locked cabinets stood open, their contents cataloged and photographed for evidence, then returned. Every micro-stamping die, every precision gauge, every handwritten note, evidence of a master craftsman who'd seen corruption and tried to stop it. The Maple Bridge had been condemned, torn down in a controlled demolition that made national news. The replacement, built by Hammond Construction under triple oversight, used verified A992 steel with modern quality tracking. I'd been hired as an independent inspector, my first official contract for Brooks and Whitfield Engineering Consultants. Mom knocked on the workshop door, carrying coffee. She looked younger somehow. The constant tension of living with Carl's temper finally lifted from her shoulders. "The divorce was finalized yesterday," she said quietly, setting the mug on Grandpa's workbench. "The lawyer says, with the criminal conviction coming, I'll get everything Carl didn't already steal. You'll be okay, Mom." "We'll be okay," she corrected, then pulled out an envelope. "Found this in Dad's safety deposit box. It's addressed to you." Grandpa's handwriting on aged paper. Inside, a brief note. "Nora, if you're reading this, you found the truth. The workshop is yours. But more importantly, the responsibility is yours. Build straight, measure true, and never let anyone convince you that good enough is good enough when lives are at stake. The tools are just tools. The integrity is what matters. Grandpa Walter." Attached was a certificate of ownership for the workshop, dated 3 years ago. Before Carl had even entered our lives, Grandpa had always planned for me to inherit it. My phone rang. Rebecca Torres, the council president. "Nora, the federal investigation is expanding. They found similar schemes in 6 other states, all connected to Carl's network. The FBI wants you to consult on the engineering analysis." "Send me the contracts," I replied, already thinking about the systematic approach needed to uncover years of infrastructure fraud. That afternoon, a truck arrived with a delivery I'd been expecting. A new laser engraving system, capable of creating microstamps invisible to the naked eye, but readable by specialized scanners. Modern technology, building on Grandpa's innovation. The invoice was marked, "Paid in full." My first purchase as a successful consultant. As I unpacked the equipment, 3 teenagers appeared at the workshop door, volunteers from the Real Youth Engineering Initiative that had formed after my demonstration. "Miss Whitfield?" the boldest one ventured. "Could you show us how the microstamping works?" I spent the next 2 hours teaching them what Grandpa had taught me: precision, patience, and the absolute nature of truth in engineering. They left with samples they'd stamped themselves, carrying forward a legacy of integrity. That evening, I stood where it had all started, at the spot where Carl had shoved me against the wall, where he'd tried to break my connection to this place. The workshop was alive again with the hum of machines, the smell of cutting oil, the promise of things yet to be built. The local news was on the radio, reporting that 3 more inspectors had been arrested, that the infrastructure investigation had become the largest in state history. Carl's name would become synonymous with corruption, a cautionary tale in engineering ethics classes. But I wasn't thinking about Carl anymore. I was thinking about the bridge I was designing, a footbridge for Riverside Elementary, to be built with the students watching every step, learning that structures can be trusted when they're built with truth. I picked up Grandpa's square ruler, its edge still showing the faint repair where Carl had damaged it. That chip would always be there. Not a flaw, but a reminder. Sometimes things get damaged in the fight for what's right, but good tools, like good people, can be repaired and keep building. The workshop door was open, spilling light into the darkness. Other contractors had started bringing their steel for independent verification, wanting the Brooks and Whitfield stamp that guaranteed honesty. The workshop that Carl had tried to demolish had become the foundation of accountability for the entire region. I walked to Grandpa's workbench and opened his primary notebook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "Day 1, Brooks and Whitfield Engineering Consultants. The work continues." Below that, I added my first official entry: structural integrity verified for Hammond Construction. Maple Bridge Replacement Project. Materials meet or exceed all specifications. Safe for the next generation. Because that's what we build for. Not for profit, not for reputation, but for the children who will cross these bridges, learn in these schools, live in these communities. We build for the future, and the future demands truth. Carl thought he'd stolen everything when he locked away these tools. He didn't understand that the real theft was his. Stealing safety margins, stealing peace of mind, stealing lives that might have been lost to his greed. But truth, like properly rated steel, bears the weight, it holds, it endures. And in Grandpa's workshop, with his tools and his wisdom, I would keep building it. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Nora's journey. What would you have done in her situation?